Hi everyone, my name is Leah Kopke and I'm a 3D motion design freelancer. I also have a podcast where each week I cover another 3D modeling tool for Cinema 4D. Hello and welcome. Each week we've been going over another 3D modeling tool for Cinema 4D, and we've been going through sculpting tools like the draw brush, the smooth brush, and the grab brush inside of Cinema 4D. And in this video, I'm going to focus on the basic tab and the settings tab for sculpting as a reference guide for you as you're learning the new 3D modeling tools, the new brushes for sculpting in here, because these will be the same for most of the brushes. So I'll cover them here and just cover what's unique to the brush in other videos. So here we are inside of Cinema 4D. If you want your screen to look the same as mine, what I'd suggest is you change from standard to sculpting mode and you'll see everything here. The tools we're going over today will be actually within, I'll just make this cube editable using the C hotkey so that I can click on one of the brushes here. The tools that we're going over today are in the Basic tab and the Settings tab. I'm using the Draw brush as an example. Let's go ahead and get started. And you can adjust the size of your brush in here with this handle. You can also adjust it using the right and left bracket keys. You can also adjust it using the middle mouse button. So very similar to the grab brush in that sense. You can turn on link size here or here. These both do the same thing. This icon up here does the same thing as this one down here. And that'll just keep your brush size the same when you switch between brushes. So that's the first setting here while you're using this tool. And I'll just click and drag my mouse so they can see what it starts to do. So this is pretty light right now. If we want to make more of an indent in our mesh that's a little bit more visible, we can increase something called the strength. And the strength is this slider right here. So I'll crank this up and you can go above 100% by just clicking here and dragging. So I'll go ahead and use it now, and you can see that's a huge difference from that first option here. So we can not only adjust the size, we can adjust the strength in here. You can, of course, link strength, and you can click this button here, or you can click that option on and off up here. It's also available as an icon in order to control the strength of this brush while you're using it. Link stencil will allow you to keep the same stencil as you switch between brushes so that you don't have to change them or rebuild them each time. You can see the icon for it up here. This is another place where you can turn it on. Let's go over how backface works. So there's a front side and a back side to every mesh, and you can see that a little bit more when you click on the polygons. The front side is orange and the back side shows up as purple. If I were to try to use the draw brush on the front side, it works as normal. If I were to try to use it on the back side, it's no longer affecting it unless we turn on backface here. So now we can see this affecting it. So you can draw on both sides of the mesh if you'd like. I'm going to turn off backface and undo that for right now because it's not necessary. Keep visual size, this doesn't usually work for me, but it keeps the size of your brush about the same whether if you zoom in or zoom out. But I like to keep that off, and it usually is pretty buggy anyways where it doesn't work. Now preview mode works the same as with the grab brush that we covered previously. On surface means that our brush will be angled according to the surface we have our mouse over. Screen will keep it always relative to the direction we're looking. The camera that we're looking through, this will always be parallel to the camera. Off, we can't see our brush at all. And I actually don't like this because I like to be able to see the size of my brush as well as the fall off. So I'll keep this as on surface. And I'll undo what I just drew there. Over in our settings, we have other options. We have our fall off here. And this controls the shape of our brush and how it falls off around that circumference. So if I change this to straight, you'll see that our brush hair has also adjusted its shape to show a straight line. And when I drag my mouse, you'll see that that shape is a little bit different than over here. You can customize this however you'd like. So I can do something like this and change the shape. And you'll see the show when we draw with it. And you can see this update again on my brush. So that's the shape we're now creating. It's a little bit different. Hit undo a few times to go back. If you ever want to undo this and go back to the default fall off shape for your brush, you can just hit this reset button here. You can load a preset in here, like the triangle one, and then you'll have a new custom brush here. Cosine. So I'll hit undo on those. There's this really handy tool, steady stroke. I'm going to reset this back, but for the steady stroke, it helps smooth out your lines. And you can choose how much it's smoothed out based on this length here. So if I click and drag my mouse, you'll see this line show up. And that's taking the average of my mouse's movement and smoothing it out so that this is smoother than what my hand could draw. If I have a little bit of a shaky hand one day drawing with my Wacom pen or my mouse, this will smooth it all completely out. And a lot of people like to draw with that if they want really precise lines. It's one way to do it, is by turning on steady stroke and adjusting the length. You can save your fall off adjustments here. As a preset by choosing a name for it, a database, and a category if you'd like. I'm going to hit cancel because I don't want to save that. There's another option here called spacing. So I'm going to turn off steady stroke, hit undo a few times, and turn on our spacing and bump this up to a pretty large amount. I can click and draw with my mouse. And it might be a little bit difficult to see from this angle, but we are creating a line here, but each one of these is a little bit further spaced out. If I didn't want to draw on that edge so easily, I can turn on edge detect. And you'll see it kind of stops right now at that edge. So if I didn't want to go over, now it's a lot harder to accidentally go over that edge. So that's a helpful tool to know is there. This angle is determined by the normals of the mesh, and we've talked about normals quite a bit in here. I'll leave a link to those episodes if you don't know what a normal is. It's the direction of a polygon. As we talked about, there's a right side of a polygon and a wrong side of the polygon, and the normal direction of the polygon is tangent to the direction that that polygon is facing. So those numbers are being used to make calculations about where edges are. So what Cinema 4D is doing behind the scenes is it says this polygon's normal is facing this many degrees this way, And this polygon is facing this many degrees this way, comparing their normal directions, and then the variance between those two normal directions is being used to find edges. So when you are entering in an edge angle, that's the way you are calculating it. If the angle deviation between the normals is greater than the angle defined here, the brush will not affect those. So let's just go ahead and show how this works. So if we make this arrow, you could see that it really takes a lot to start affecting that other side. If we make this 90 degrees, this is already being pulled, the surface, because of how much we increased it. So that's basically how that works. So when you get into maybe more detailed areas like this, if you keep it lower, you're less likely to start affecting other areas that are going at a different angle. But if you increase this quite a bit, then you can easily start adjusting this eye. If you just want to stay away from that edge, then you could make the angle much lower, and it won't, while you're sculpting, you aren't affecting the details in the eye as much. That is how your edge detect works. This next setting that I want to show you, there's a little bit of a catch to it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you within Cinema 4D how it works. I am dropping in a new cube into my scene, and I'm going to set it up about the same way as before. Hit C to make it editable. So now we have this cube, and if we were to use our draw brush and drop a stamp in here and use, I'm just going to use this pattern here. So now we have a pattern in there. You'd think that if you decided to use the option drag rectangle or drag dabs, this would work on this rectangle now. This would work on this cube right now, because in theory, all you need for drag rectangle or drag dabs to work would be to add in your stamp image here, you'd think. But there's a little bit of a catch to this. We have different draw modes, and by default we use this one here, freehand, and that's the most common one. However, there are times when you might want to draw out a texture, and that's where draw rectangle or draw dabs comes in helpful. And I've noticed that this tool doesn't work unless if you hit this unsubdivide button here. And then you click on this new one and hide the original. Once you do that, you are able to use drag rectangle on it. And that's how drag rectangle is supposed to work. In theory, most of the sculpting tools work on a mesh regardless of if it has this sculpting tag added to it, which is what is added when you hit the unsubdivide. So that's a little bit of a bug perhaps that I found. And we're actually going to go more into depth of what the subdivide and unsubdivide are within Cinema 4D for sculpting pretty soon. But that's just something I wanted to show you, just because I found that really kind of unintuitive that that's the way it works, and it's not something they point out in the manual to you either. So even if you went through the trouble of reading the manual, that wouldn't be clear. But that's what you need to do for that to work. And I just like to go through a little bit more of what these draw modes are and what exactly draw rectangle is. And I'll increase the strength here a little bit, increase this. But when you click and drag your mouse, you'll see the texture starts to appear. You can rotate it by moving your mouse back and forth. And you can see this update pretty well before you let go. And you can see here that our fall off is being added and it's grabbing our settings from our stamp. So if I turn off the fall off and I click and drag, you'll see that updates accordingly. Our fall off is no longer affecting this pattern. So this can be really interesting and helpful for adding textures to objects or adding in some little imperfections and details. We have some more options for the draw mode, and these draw mode settings are all under the settings tab. Freehand is the one we're used to. That's it there. You have drag rectangle that we went over, drag dabs. You basically can drag the texture wherever you'd like and let go, and that's where the texture will live. You may be able to see this a little bit more clearly if I make the size bigger with my right bracket. And once you're ready to place the texture, you can. There's another option in here, line. You can draw with lines. What you do for that is you click to create points, and we're creating lines. If you hit the backspace, it will undo the last line you created. If you double click, it'll complete that and create that texture going along the line. The next option is lasso fill. And you'll see these options that have fill at the end of it come with additional settings like fill symmetry or fill back faces. Fill back faces will also affect the back faces of your mesh. The lasso tool, you can just draw a shape and let go, and it'll fill in that selection with that texture. Fill symmetry will apply the texture symmetrically if you have it on and you are using symmetry. We'll cover symmetry more in the future, but that is just letting you know that this tool has the option of being used with the symmetry options. Polyfill is a little bit different than the lasso, but you can create a shape using lines. And then when you're done, you can hit enter and it will create a closed shape with the pattern inside. Rectangle fill. You just make a rectangular shape and fill it in with the texture is basically how that works. And I'm going to use this with fill back faces on. And you can see that it fills all the way through here. It goes all the way through the back faces of the mesh and affects everything. Just so you're aware. I'm going to undo so that this is a nice clean cube. And I'm going to do that one more time. Here we go. And now you can see that went all the way through the entire cube, affecting the back faces as well. You have options for your draw mode in terms of direction. I have mine set to normal. You can set it to X, Y, Z, or camera. If you choose camera, it's relative to the direction of the camera that the texture will be applied. If you are using a Wacom pen while using these brush settings, the computer can actually sense how hard you're pushing while you're drawing lines or sculpting inside of Cinema 4D with these tools. And the buildup will affect how quickly the pattern builds up according to that pen pressure while you're sculpting. So right now I'm using my mouse, so this won't have a huge effect. But if I were using a Cintiq right now and my Wacom pen, you'd be able to see that take place a little bit more while I'm drawing in perhaps freehand. Because your actual pen pressure, similar to drawing in real life, will affect how the surface is being pushed or pulled. And just a reminder, if you hold Control, it will apply the effect in the opposite direction. You could also invert the direction by clicking this invert button down here. So that's also another option, but I think it's a lot easier to just hold the Control button. That would be Command on Mac. If you're working on a Mac, I'm working on a PC. So that pretty much wraps up the settings for the Basic tab and the Settings tab for sculpting inside of Cinema 4D. I hope to see you here next time on Ambient 3D Animations. If you'd like to be notified the next episode or video that I come out with, please hit like and subscribe. I hope to see you here next time on Ambient 3D Animations.